The most recent event within Escape from Tarkov has got a ton, and I mean an absolute ton, of hate from a lot of people, and there's a few issues that have been arising with some of the latest events, including of course the Night of the Cult event that has been going on until October 21st. It was available for 10 days starting on the 11th of October, and eventually they then had to make some changes to the actual event, and then basically gave us 3 days since those changes actually happened to try and complete all of the tasks. And so the event in general, for those of you who may or may not have been playing, it's basically eliminating cultists during the time period that we actually had this event available, which is 10 days. Now, for a lot of people that either play PVE or PvP, because this was an event that is basically allowed on both versions of the game, there were a few distinct differences, and some people, especially if you play PvP, probably found this even harder than those playing PvE because of the fact that either you've got to compete with other players to be able to take out cultists on every single one of the maps, and the fact that the spawn rate of these was absolutely dreadful for the first 7 days of the entire 10-day event, and then going forward from then you essentially had slightly increased spawns of the cultists themselves, but they still weren't perfect, and it meant trying to complete some of the later tasks that are available just basically very, very difficult. Now, the first one was just simply eliminating 5 cultists, which I'm pretty sure most people could do if they put in the time and the effort to actually do, so not a particularly difficult task to actually complete, and it gave you some pretty good rewards, which I think were good in that regard, so I guess props to BSG for that. But it definitely doesn't go on like that. And with the second part of the event, you had the Graven Image. This is the second task that you had available, and this one required you to neutralize Oni, Harbinger and Ghost, which are basically reskinned versions of the goons that have the kind of cultist themed apparel and stuff like that, but it's similar sort of thing to what you would see with the normal goons. It's a squad of 3 and you have to take out each and every one of them in that group. You don't have to do it in the same raid, they just had to be taken out during the event period, and that rewarded you with some pretty decent rewards like the Abandoned Factory marked key and of course the Mysterious Room or Check 13 marked room key for streets, so not bad either. So in terms of rewards are up there, but the problem with these kind of events is that the rate at which these bosses actually spawned, and of course the cultists themselves, was just diabolically low for a lot of people. And when you're competing with other people who are also in your raid, if you're playing PvP, where they take out the cultists, and then you may only get 1 cultist, maybe 2 cultists at maximum, sometimes being able to take them all out, maybe 3 or 4 depending on the map, and of course how many cultists can actually spawn on that map. And of course, they're not the easiest thing to actually take out, especially when they're in a group and a pack, so that can also become a bit of an issue when you're trying to farm these out. Now, Factory, for example, is very easy to farm the cultists. They have generic spawns, and they're typically in the middle of the map, and so it wasn't particularly too difficult. If you watched the video that we put out on the weekend, then you probably saw how you can take out a lot of cultists. But the problem is with the next operation. This is kind of the end operation, and it was Until Dawn, which is where you get a very, very good reward. You have the, you could get the RBPKPM, RBVO, and RBBK marked room keys. They're all for reserve, so all 3 of them for the reserve map. You also unlocked, you got a T7 thermal goggles, which is great with a night vision mount. And then you also got yourself a barter for a DVL and also the Benelli M3 Super. So you could get both of those in the game as well, unlocked at various different Jaeger levels. And so once you complete that, then you get some pretty good rewards. Yet again, lots of marked room keys, lots of rubles worth of marked room keys. So that is good. But the problem with this one is that you had to eliminate 15 cultists on all of the maps that the cultists can spawn. And this is something that wouldn't be too bad if there was a abundant amount of cultists on every single one of the maps. For example, on this you had 15 on Ground Zero, Lighthouse, Shoreline, Streets, Woods, Customs and Factory. So that is 7 different maps, and off the top of my head with the maths, that's 105 cultists that you had to take out for the rewards of the final event task. And so 105. Now if we're breaking it down into the fact that you need essentially to take out maybe you take out one cultist in every single one of your raids. Okay, so that's for a PvE player might be slightly easier because you're not competing with players, as in actual players who are going to be hunting directly for them. But even then, you're still having to deal with the AI that are going to have to fight them. And so it becomes this like thing where each of the maps you're going to have to play 15, 20, maybe even more times, depending on how often you find them and how easy you find it to take them out. And so yes, you can take out 2, but then you could also go an X amount of raids before even having them spawn in your raid. So we take the initial amount, so 105 that you need to take out, assuming you take out 1 every single time that they actually spawn. And then the fact that the spawn rate, for at least from what I saw, maybe ranging from like 30 to 50% dependent on the map, and of course what BSG actually implemented into the game. Now lots of people are saying it's like 25%. Some people are saying it was 50%. So even if we took the best case scenario, 50%, it would take you 210 raids in order to actually complete just the final operation. 210 different raids, assuming that you're taking out 1 cultist every single raid when they do spawn. Now, sometimes if people are very good at the game, they're going to do more and it's going to take less time. If you're slightly newer to the game and it's taking you longer, of course, you could amplify that by, double. And so you're having to spend 420. But, it just depends on how many and how lucky you get as well with the spawn rate. So with that in mind, it's one of these things where BSG, I think, just completely missed the mark with their pacing, because they gave us 10 days, and especially considering the first time that we actually had them, for the first 7 days, the spawn rate seemed to be absolutely garbage. I went into like 10 different factory raids, and maybe I found cultists once. Like, it was very, very hard to find them. Some people get lucky, they find them 3 in a row. Some people find them that they go 10 raids without finding any. And, I think when it comes to how long they're expecting you to play during these events, it's just way overestimated, because even some of the streamers just had no chance of being able to complete this operation, even with them playing, 8 hours a day. And so for the average player, who isn't competing with the AI or who isn't competing with other players, and, when you add in all of those extra factors, it makes these events basically impossible to complete for a generic Tarkov player who comes on after work and plays, 2 hours, 3 hours of a night. And even then, is that a casual amount of time playing every day? Probably not. And so, you could probably do about 4 to 5 raids in an hour if you're really just maximizing how quickly you're in those raids and going for the cultists. Most people probably going to do 3 raids an hour. You take that 210 different raids that you're going to have to do. That is 70 hours worth of gameplay within 10 days. Now, that is 7 hours a day in order to complete this event, which I think is absolutely ludicrous, and the first 7 days were probably even worse than that. And that's assuming that there is a 50% spawn rate of the actual cultists, which I'm probably more inclined to say it was less than that. So yeah, a very, very difficult event to complete. And I think if you were going to release this, at least it should have gone on until the end of Halloween. The fact that they cut it short on the 1st of October just felt like it was a bit of a middle finger to anyone that's trying to complete the event. It would be nice to have it on, and then of course just add in some extra events if that's what they're entailing and they're teasing with the latest kind of teasers that have come out on Twitter, for example. And if they just keep doing this over and over again, people get fed up. And actually, there's lots of hype when events come out on Tarkov, and it's one of the best things to kind of bring back players to play the game, to try it out. But when they realise just how long and how far they're going to have to grind, because it's okay to have a grind and a mission to actually go and complete, but when they're so long to the point where you're going to have to spend that much time, it puts off a lot of players from actually trying to complete the game, and they're just going to leave and go, you know what, it's not worth it for the rewards that I'm going to get. Spending 70 hours of my life is not going to be worth it for the sake of a couple of Mark Dream keys, and they'd rather spend 70 hours just doing some loot runs and probably make well over the amount of money that you would normally make from doing those raids. So yeah, I would recommend when these events to come out to kind of weigh it up as to how long you think it's going to take. Just do some quick little calculations, or maybe just, eyeball it, whatever it is, just kind of weigh it up and go, you know what, if I'm doing it for the money, is it actually worth it, my time? Or is it better to just go ahead and farm some money for like 5 mil rubles an hour doing something else for like 10 hours instead of spending 70 hours to probably get the same amount of money. So from that standpoint, that's kind of what it is. But I really hope when BSG decide to do more of these events going forward that they think a bit more about their actual player base and not trying to feel like everyone is pressured into spending way too much time playing the game, because at the end of the day it just ends up to burnout and people are just going to stop playing the game if they're not finding it fun because they just cannot get these tasks completed. And yes, you don't have to do the tasks. There's going to be people that are saying, well, I completed it, blah blah blah. Well, good for you, but remember that there is probably hundreds of thousands of people that play during those 10 days over the course of all of those 10 days. And so, yeah, there's a lot of people that probably felt it was impossible for them, and the generic audience of Tarkov is probably not going to be able to ever complete this event, and most people probably didn't. So hopefully going forward, there seemed to be a new teaser for the next kind of event that appears to be around labs, whether it is an actual labs event or whether it's a teaser for some form of video that Tarkov are going to do at some point, I don't know, but hopefully there is an actual scheduled Halloween event that continues after this one, and hopefully it's not just a reskin version of the goons and a ludicrously amount of farming that you have to do within the game to complete those tasks, and a bit more nuanced and stuff like that. So I think those sorts of events would be great to have into the game, and hopefully they'll do that. So with that being said, if you've enjoyed this video, if you enjoy Escape from Tarkov and you want to put your own comments and opinions down in the comment section down below, make sure to do so. I'm really interested to see what you guys think, whether you play PvP or PvE. It's all interesting to see your differences in opinions and how far you actually got with this event. Did you give up or did you continue? And I will see you in the next one. Goodbye.